Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Farah Kimji, the founder of Futura Funds and the president of Toronto Crew. We are so happy to have all of you join us online for today's event organized by our Programs Committee. For all of those joining today, both members and non-members, the mission of Crew Network is to transform the commercial real estate industry by advancing women globally. With over 75 chapters and 12,000 members, Crew Network has provided the platform and support necessary to deliver on that mission for over 30 years. And we are committed to this now more than ever before. 2020 and now 2021 has been a challenging time for all of us on so many fronts. And we at Toronto Crew were not immune to those challenges. We chose to face those challenges head on by being creative, agile, adaptive, and innovative. Since the start of the pandemic, we have produced over 50 events, and we found creative ways to deliver our programming in a new format, including all of our signature events, Real Jobs Day, professional development offerings, community outreach, our mentorship program, and we even formed 2 new committees. Our past president's committee to act as advisors and provide support to all of our other committees, and our IDEA committee to promote and foster inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship within our membership and the industry at large. And we have started 2021 in a strong position, exceeding our sponsorship targets and with over 70 new members joining, so many of our long-standing and renewed members. This year also marks the 25th anniversary for Toronto Crew, and we are very excited to take a look back and celebrate these milestones throughout the years while looking forward to the next 25 with a renewed sense of excitement as our industry continues to transform and innovate. We have a committee that is hard at work planning an exciting celebration that will take place in the last quarter of the year, so stay tuned. We could not be able to deliver on all of these fronts without the support of our sponsors. I would now like to take a moment to thank the 2021 sponsors. Your sponsorship allows us to deliver relevant, educational, and engaging programming for our members, and we are very appreciative of your support, so thank you. I would also like to share our upcoming events as displayed in the presentation. We encourage everyone to register and join us online for a great lineup of events, especially our AGM, which is coming up on June 17th for the first time in a virtual format, and we've added on an activity. So that event is just for our members, and we really would love to see all of you online at that one. All right, so now without further ado, on to the main event. I would like to introduce our moderator, Sheila Botting, who will lead today's discussion. Sheila Botting leads the Americas Professional Services practice at Avis & Young, and through her executive real estate career, Sheila has led a number of multidisciplinary real estate teams and assignments across the industry with owners, investors, and corporate occupiers alike, earning the reputation as one of the go-to commercial real estate advisors across the Americas. This also makes Sheila the right person to moderate today's panel, from market impact to stakeholder insight, a post-COVID-19 real estate perspective. Over to you, Sheila.
Thanks so much, Farah. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be able to work with Toronto Crew and, of course, our esteemed panelists. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce, a rock star panel group, including Wendy Waters, who is Vice President of Research and Strategy for GWL Realty Advisors. Certainly very insightful perspectives on the market that Wendy will share with office, multi-res, and investment. I'd also like to introduce Meredith Darnell from Brookfield Properties. She's SVP for Business Intelligence and Strategy. Who knew that BI would be part of a title, right? I can't wait to hear your comments with respect to the retail sector. And of course, we also have Rob Lauer, SVP of Industrial at Quadrille. And how can you possibly shop without the supply chain right in behind us? So hearing that whole story across the spectrum is really important. So thank you very much for joining us for the conversation. In terms of our format today, we decided to mix it up a bit because everybody's on these Zoom calls and they have people, blah, blah, blah. And so what we decided to do is that we wanted to have a poll question to understand everybody's appetite with respect to return to work, return to office, return to normal, whatever normal looks like. And I think it's always fun watching how everybody answers to this. So if you could check out the various responses here. What's your level of comfort returning to normal in fall 2021, such as shopping or indoor restaurants or going back to the office or transit, business or travel? Where do you fall on this spectrum? This will really help us to set the tone for the rest of the conversation this afternoon. So hopefully, Sharon, we've got lots of great responses here. I know that having everybody's views to that, look at that, 41%. By the fall, I'll be ready for all or most activities. 18% saying they're feeling comfortable now, and 27% said they only feel comfortable doing a few normal things. Interesting, right? This is largely sharing with everybody that this is behind us. We want to just move on with our lives. I don't know about everybody else, but I've been sitting in the same chair for like 420 days and like enough is enough. What I'd like to do is to open the conversation with kind of setting the stage for where we're at today. So Avison Young maintains mobility data for downtown every city in Canada and certainly in North America. As of just before, oh, not quite yet, not the slide yet, please. Just before the lockdown, the most recent lockdown, we were at a 4.5% recovery index. That meant that when you were tracking mobility data for Union Station, for downtown Toronto, only 4.5% of the volume as before COVID. So you're saying like, let me out. I want to move on to the next place. But then the question becomes, what does new normal look like? So I'm going to open up with a couple of comments with respect to what we in the real estate community need to consider as we come up with the new normal. If we can go to the next slide, please. And so when you think about every asset class that we look at, whether it's office, retail, industrial, institutional, public sector, or residential, every single asset class has gone through a transformation. And that was taking place before COVID, and now this is really accelerating it. And we'll talk about all of these trends today. Employees know that they can work anywhere, anytime, any place, with anyone in any way that they want. Consumers can do the same thing. I can shop online or in the store. And that's why store networks were going through a major shift. And of course, all the things that they were buying were, backed up in the supply chain, not to mention some of the geopolitics and supply chain challenges that we've been facing. And of course, layered across all of that would be considerations around ESG. And it's not surprising that the public sector has had to also consider modernizing operations, moving to a digital platform for many of their businesses and how they get things done. And of course, regulatory environments. What we've learned is that real estate in our post-pandemic world, we're understanding it's more than just the bricks and mortar. Real estate is a living environment, and we understand it's helping us to do our business, work, shop, and play. And so therefore, for those of us in the industry, we have to understand how our assets and our properties can deliver the human experience, to drive the change and opportunity to have people return to normal. Next slide, please. So I borrowed a little bit from some of the, experienced experts. When you think about Starbucks, you go to Starbucks and you know right away, wow, I'm going to have a really cool vibe when I'm there. I know that. Well, think about the shrewd, strategy on behalf of the CEO, Howard Schultz. He suggested that in the market, competitors were charging 50 cents for a cup of brewed coffee. But once Starbucks said, let's have an Italian coffee house with an incredible experience, and we can actually charge a premium, since 1992, the stock has grown by 5,000% based on experience. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that, in fact, others in the industry, whether it's Amazon, Ritz-Carlton, Disney, BMW, Apple, Mercedes, they all understand that it's about the ever-evolving needs of customers. So think about everybody returning to our buildings in this post-COVID world. They're going to want a whole new experience. At the same time, we have to make sure that our employees understand what that is, and we've considered all of their concerns and opportunities. We have to think about opportunities and requirements that our customers haven't even thought about yet. Who knew that we'd want to be working remotely or in an agile fashion before COVID? And as we advance toward our new normal, we have to make sure that everybody's on point and trained toward the future and toward what that is. And that's really all about empowering our people toward the human experience. Next slide. And so what we think that the organizations that get this right, and of course, we're going to hear from everybody on the call today, talking about how their businesses focus in on this to drive the opportunity. So I'd like to turn over to our next poll question. As we introduce Meredith Darnell, Meredith is going to talk to us about the business strategy and intelligence for the retail at Brookfield Properties. But before that, we're going to start with a question. For your post-pandemic shopping needs, how likely are you to buy online for curbside pickup or pickup in a store?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to see our poll questions so that many of you are following some of the same trends that we are seeing. And we have a whole new way that we can go shopping that is all about holistic consumer convenience and really utilizing all the omnichannel capabilities retailers are going to offer us. So it's great to see these results. So if we can advance into the presentation, please, and into the next slide. I want to spend a few minutes talking about how we really see brick and mortar stores playing into a healthy retail strategy. And over the last several years, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about the relevance of physical stores. And with the onset of the pandemic, some even speculated that this was going to be the moment in which consumers just stop shopping in stores altogether, and we would totally shift our buying online. But in fact, retail performance has shown us that this is not the case, and brick and mortar stores are still as relevant as ever to driving a successful retail strategy. In fact, today in the United States, retail sales still contribute 74% of total retail sales per Euromonitor information. And this is really notable because the US is the second largest e-commerce market behind China across the globe. And by comparison, Canada is now the 9th largest e-commerce market in the world. Next slide, please. So we want to go back to April of 2020, when really, because of the pandemic, we saw brick and mortar stores shut down worldwide. And during this time period, traffic to retail commerce sites grew 88%. And this makes complete sense. We really had no other way to go shopping but to shift all of our purchases online. It's particular, Canadian consumers really leaned into e-commerce over the last year. From a recent study by MasterCard, 50% of Canadian consumers said they bought more online than they had prior to the pandemic. And this is very significant because across the globe, only 43% of global consumers said they were buying more online. So by necessity, we definitely saw this shift across the Canadian marketplaces. In the US, as you can see on the chart in front of you, during April, at the height of the store closures, digital sales peaked at 27%. really proving that e-commerce could not offset the 44.3 billion in lost retail sales due to brick and mortar closings. As our sanctions eased and we could bring occupancy back into our stores, consumers really did return to the stores and were happy to be shopping again. So by the end of the year, the US Census reported that 76% of total sales were generated in brick and mortar stores. And we saw this trend has continued even in Q1 of 2021. It's also notable that in Canada, we saw that e-commerce sales started to ease a little bit through February of 2021, suggesting that consumers were excited to come out and go back and visit physical retail services and stores. Yet the recent lockdown did kind of cause this trend to sway. We'll likely see more of an e-commerce pickup in the next couple of months, but we do expect that during summer, like their US counterparts, Canadian consumers will start to return to stores and services as restrictions ease and vaccinations begin to progress. So next slide, please. What's really notable, even with the last year and all the impact of the pandemic, we still see retailers investing capital in new stores. Since the start of 2019, national retailers have opened nearly 8,000 new locations here in North America. And despite the COVID-19 pressures in 2020, 3,000 new stores opened between January and October in the last year. Next slide. So we really see that physical retail has become, the importance of it has become magnified during the pandemic. And we particularly love this quote by Calvin McDonald, the CEO of Lululemon, where he states that physical retail is an important part of the brand's growth strategy. It enables them to have places of engagement for their local communities, offer omnichannel capabilities, and support customer acquisition. And if we move to the next slide, this statement is really in concert with where Brookfield sees the role of the store evolving. And so our best retail operators have realized that stores do more than just drive in-store transactions. They are also platforms that offer brand building and affinity because they allow consumers to still touch and feel and try on product. And they're platforms for customer acquisition, essentially serving as billboards for their brand. And even prior to the pandemic, we note that healthy retailers began to leverage their store fleets as micro-fulfillment hub. And we really saw these omnichannel capabilities accelerate in the last year as more and more retailers decided to use their stores to offer buy online, pick up in store and curbside capabilities, as well as become a return center. And this is very important because consumer use of buy online, pick up in store grew 500% over the last year. And also, we saw retailers begin to use their stores as fulfillment centers and distribution centers. So essentially, they were fulfilling e-commerce orders by shipping straight from their store. And using store fleets as these micro-fulfillment hubs is very important for two reasons. In the last year, it allowed retailers to really sustain their sales, even during the down periods of the pandemic. Also, they contributed to healthier margins as the cost to fulfill e-commerce orders from DCs grew substantially. Using the store fleet to really fulfill these orders and create a holistic service really is going to healthy margin and drives a profitable business. So next slide. We have a great case study that we look at, and that is in Peloton, which is essentially a digitally native brand who really thought about their store growth plan very early and how they could use physical retail to their advantage. They quickly scaled to grow a store fleet that brought customer exposure and really brought greater awareness of their product. So at the start of the pandemic, they were well positioned to capture share as all consumers were scrambling to really build and create our at-home gym and fitness facilities. And in fact, their leadership credits their store fleet with helping drive a revenue increase of over 200%. So in the next slide. So the implications of omnichannel retail is very relevant for retail real estate owners because we can successfully partner with our tenants to utilize their store fleets as places of discovery, fulfillment, and returns. And we believe that this type of partnership with retailers will allow retail landlords and real estate owners to be in a position to win. So for Brookfield, we really see our strategy to evolve our centers into hubs of daily life and commerce remains as relevant as ever, but this will evolve with changing consumer and tenant needs. In the next slide. So this really plays into a strategy that we began even prior to the pandemic, which is really to evolve our curation strategy to move beyond shopping and really use our venues to create destinations serving the daily needs of our consumers. So this strikes a balance of offering traditional specialty based retailers along with other desired uses that consumers have, including fitness, education, entertainment, dining, and medical. And we believe that high quality centers that are really thinking about this level of positioning will best benefit both consumers and our retail tenants. And that is all. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Meredith. That was a great presentation. I've got a million questions for you. I'd like to introduce next Rob Lauer from Quadrille, SVP for Industrial. And Rob's going to share with us his perspectives overall for the industrial asset class. But I think we're going to pop up a poll question before Rob get to speak in this. How likely are you to buy direct from an online retailer instead of using Amazon, even if it means waiting longer for delivery? Wow, what a great question, Rob. I can't wait to hear your answer to this one.
Thanks for the introduction, Sheila. While we wait for the response and the slides here, I mean, the picture that you see of me here is clearly a pre-COVID haircut. I'm anxious to get back and as things open up. So wow, that's good. I mean, we see Amazon clearly as the big A word, right? It's massive, and the global footprint for industrial space is just something we've never seen before. And usually that means there's competition, and competition spurs opportunity for other businesses. And to wait a few extra days for a package as Amazon really gears up the machine to deliver quicker. I came up with the question because do we really care if it's within an hour or same day, or can we wait a few extra days? So my first slide here is I like to call this the great social experiment. A little bit of fun here. We've all kind of felt like we've been part of a lab experiment for the last 18 months. And as Sheila pointed out, we're eager to get on with life. But clearly COVID has produced some winners and losers from an economic standpoint. While some of us have been very fortunate to be able to work from home safely, many haven't been so lucky. And like Sasquatch here, hiding in global world champion social distancing, and our buddy here Wilson managing the flock from home, working remotely for millions just hasn't been an option. And clearly the manufacturing and warehouse sectors have been an important part of the economy before COVID. But when COVID hit, they actually were deemed essential. And this industrial and logistics sector and real estate has without a doubt been the big winner from an asset class perspective during COVID. To be fair, the asset class was top of mind for many investors well before the pandemic, but COVID was the accelerant that you hear all the time. It really launched an all-out frenzy for space. Many of the trends in the sector before COVID, e-commerce, automation, access to labor, last mile operations, will continue to advance post-COVID, but perhaps at a more rapid pace than before. So I've been asked to really talk about how this world relates to the post-COVID world from the industrial sector. And, a lot like retail, industrial was transitioning well before COVID. As previously mentioned, the asset class for the most part has been the big winner during COVID because most logistics operations, as I mentioned, employees were deemed essential. And they were tasked with the responsibility effectively of keeping the economy on life support by keeping goods moving through the supply chain. And keeping those goods moving, as we learned, was a major source of the transmission of the virus and into the community, which further frustrated government policies towards social distancing and lockdown measures. So fear is a great motivator, and it's a phrase that's been used for generations. And COVID, it certainly injected fear into the global economy like nothing we've seen before, at least in this generation. And businesses scrambled to implement measures to keep their employees safe and remain open for business. It took some time for science and best practices to evolve as it's still evolving. And thankfully now that we have a vaccine in place, and hopefully, we have an end in sight. The big question is, do we? So what happens if we start to withdraw these public safety measures too fast, or perhaps more likely a new COVID variant emerges, one that's vaccine resistant? For this reason, we expect federal and provincial governments and businesses to keep, social distancing COVID sort of restrictions in place for this foreseeable future, I think businesses and governments will plan for the worst and hope for the best. So even after COVID is no longer a serious threat, we will continue to see social distancing in the warehouses. Look for more warehouse automation as part of post-COVID world. Automation helps address growing labor shortages and really helps, with the social distancing aspect and employee safety. E-commerce, are there any skeptics left? I mean, if there was a retail CEO that hadn't adopted a strategy for e-commerce pre-COVID, I can pretty much assure you that's changed, or if the person is no longer employed in the organization. E-commerce trends started well before COVID and will continue post-COVID. The really only question is, will it be a major pullback to a more normalized growth trajectory, or do we continue to stay on that same growth curve as more of us are certainly more comfortable buying online as part of this big experiment? Online grocery and meal kits will continue to boom post-COVID. I think folks that have discovered the meal kit is certainly something I enjoy. Micro retailers with their own e-commerce platforms will continue to evolve. As part of my question, will you support other e-commerce providers and micro retailers as opposed to just going through Amazon? But Amazon will be Amazon and continue their massive expansion in North America. But that will spawn competition, new competition from others looking for a piece of that e-commerce pie. Supply chain was mentioned earlier, where from and how fast. Clearly, COVID put a massive spotlight on every company, every government supply chain from source to final destination. And need I say more than PPE and toilet paper as examples? I mean, the backup plans for backup plans, supply chains, they were always about getting product from point A to point B as quickly and cheaply as possible. But companies are now going to be looking for greater redundancies throughout the network. But this is going to come at a cost for all of us. Technology will continue to drive improvements in the supply chain. Quickly improving AI technologies will be able to better predict how much and where to store inventory just in case. Until then, we see users carrying more inventory on hand once production is able to ramp back up to the pre-COVID levels. Another trend, we certainly smaller decentralized warehouses as part of the e-commerce phenomenon. Companies were already and still are looking heavily to move more product closer to the last mile in an attempt to gain market share for sure, and to help avoid the congestion once we return to a post-pandemic world. I guess last sort of on this slide, the greater reliance on 3PLs as companies look to increase capacity and flexibility in the supply chain. They're going to use the 3PLs to help with periods that increase demand and the potential service interruptions. So we flip to the last slide. So what does it mean for the future of post-COVID world? Clearly, there's going to continue to be strong capital and income growth over the next 5 years in most North American cities, and especially here in the GTA. Limited new supply, growing demand from investors and users. The Amazon factor, of course, absorbing massive amounts of space in the Canadian US markets to the delight of owners. Even if it's not in the owner's portfolio, it's certainly driving down availability and driving up rental rates. There'll be continued shift to e-commerce, no surprise there. Expect e-commerce as a percentage of the total retail to continue to increase post-COVID. Might be a little pullback, but we see that curve continuing on. Labor shortages are like the number one concern for most employers finding locations now. Raising labor and material costs, inflation is a real concern. Health, safety, and sustainability, as Sheila mentioned, is finally becoming mainstream for owners of and users of industrial. It's long overdue. Employees of warehouses are, they're not just shippers, receivers, and forklift drivers, and they're becoming valued team members where health and job satisfaction are finally becoming a top priority. Multi-level warehousing, I didn't leave this to last, but it's just really just beginning in North America, so we can expect many more projects in the years ahead, especially in the land constrained markets. Scalable processes and picking strategies. It's all about efficiency and meeting peak demand. And through that, they'll use technology as a key to future-proofing the supply chain. Adoption, automated picking, AI, cybersecurity, robotics, autonomous vehicles are coming for sure. And I guess the question mark on drones, when will that happen? In a nutshell, the industrial sector was hot before COVID. It got a lot hot during COVID, and with limited new supply in the large markets in North America and massive demand from investors and users for the warehouse space, the outlook for industrial will continue to outperform, for this foreseeable future from our perspective. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was a great conversation. And, many questions that we're going to have, chasing you as we go forward. I'd like to next introduce Wendy Waters, who is Vice President of Research and Strategy for GWL Realty Advisors. Wendy's going to talk about all of these really important topics, especially investment. What do you buy, when, where, how? But first of all, let's go to our last poll question. Which is, what has been the hardest part about working during the pandemic? Oh, I love the work from home versus work in the office. I'm dying to hear what everybody has to say about this one. So Wendy, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Guess my video's not up, just a sec. No, the host has my video. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Hopefully, someone can get my video started. It's my first time speaking at Crew Toronto, which is really exciting. And I've been to a few Crew Toronto events. I'm in Toronto quite regularly, even though I'm based in Vancouver. So I'm going to run through slides really quick here. I didn't get a chance to see poll results, so maybe someone can email them to me, so I'll be able to comment on them later. I'm going to run through some slides really quick. We'll go with a picture says 1,000 worlds. Oh, there, poll results came up. Yeah, the no separation from work and home. Yes, sometimes it sounds really great to be able to work from home, but having to live at work, I think, is getting really tiring for all of us. And the longer hours, yes, I would agree with those two of the strongest ones. So we'll close that. And I'm going to start with the office market, then a couple slides on multi-res and a couple slides on investment. And I'm going to go fast. Feel free to reach out to me after the presentation if we don't cover it in the Q&A and you have a question. So thought I'd just get everybody seeing what's going on in downtown office vacancy rates across Canada. The two lines towards the top with the very high vacancies, you can probably imagine, are in Alberta, the higher one being Calgary, and it's gotten a higher vacancy rate during the pandemic. Edmonton stayed more stable. A lot of the Calgary vacancy isn't necessarily pandemic related. It's some of it's still further consolidations within the oil and gas sector. You can see Toronto in the black line down below started the pandemic as the lowest vacancy rate in the downtown, and it has been rising. We were expecting that because of some of the migration to the big new bank towers, and that there's some consolidation happening as a result of that. So they weren't always about net new demand. In our GWLRA forecast, we see Toronto going up a little closer to 13–14% and then steadily coming down over the next few years after that. A lot of that is based on new supply. Next slide, please. It's also, we'll also get into some of the sublease space, which it's about. We've been looking at what's been happening in CBDs around the world, particularly where our parent company, Canada Life, has some investments. But Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver CBD, what's really important about this pandemic compared to past downturns for the office market is this pandemic hasn't been about the office market. Like the global financial crisis was a crisis of office using companies, banks. The tech wreck was a crisis of office using companies, technology. And this one, though, of course, it's a pandemic. So the office using jobs have actually stayed fairly steady and even grown during the pandemic in Canada. Just everybody's working from home, and that's what's creating some of the vacancy, which we'll see in a minute. What's interesting to see, Canada, the three major CBDs down to 4% vacancy pre-COVID, up to about 9%. You can see where the major US CBDs were as a comparison, started at a much higher level, and although didn't jump in a percentage basis quite as much. The big story in terms of vacancy in the pandemic, though, is sublease space. We go to the next slide. And for Toronto, what's interesting, there's a lot more sublease space on the market. Do we have the next slide? Thank you. A lot more sublease space on the market than past downturns. So if you look to the far right, you look at the dark bars, sublease vacancy. And if you sort of skim through the tech wreck and skim through the financial crisis, you'll notice not nearly as much sublease space. Some of that has to do with how it's tracked. A lot of you have probably worked in brokerage and realize that when something is listed as vacant, it has to be physically vacant. Well, our entire office market is physically vacant right now, particularly in the downtown. So any space in the past, a lot of sublease space might have been available, but not listed as vacant. It would have still been used until the tenant found a subtenant. So some of this space would still be in use. It's not like it's space that's no longer in demand. And what we're starting to hear is when there actually is an offer on some sublease space, it often then gets pulled off the market. There's a fair number of companies that still know they need space coming out of this. And as the vaccine rollout comes on, I'm hearing more and more brokers that are less optimistic about some of the sublease space that they have as actually being available. So I think there could be as much as half of the sublease space actually is still needed. So that would put down a little bit, it means a little bit less vacancy than what you would, the stats are showing. Next slide. Another interesting thing about the sublease space, both in Toronto and Vancouver, it tends to be in a lot of smaller blocks, other than those big blocks we knew about from the banks and the larger companies moving into the new bank towers. This is Vancouver, and you can see from the peach and the beige parts of the bar there, most of the sublease space is actually in the B and C class. So in downtowns, it's quite often an opportunity for flight to quality. And in Vancouver, most of the space is really small. It's in 5,000 square feet or less. And so some of these companies, obviously, it's a little bit easier to pivot to work from home, or maybe to change what they're going to do post-COVID. And so a little bit less in the A space, but still compared to past downturns, there is still more listed. And again, I think some of that is simply because nobody's in the space. So we might as well list it if we're not using it. Maybe we can get some recovery on our costs. And we can talk a bit more about sublease later, potentially in the Q&A. Moving to the next slide, please. So what's going to happen with office space going forward? Really interesting survey by KPMG of 500 global CEOs, 69% in August 2020 saying that they thought they would need to downsize their office footprint. That dropped to 17% by March 2021. And some of that's companies just not knowing who's going to stay working from home, how well that's working. Is it going to work to have some people at home and some people at the office? Are we going to have some days where everyone's at the office? We think we've all seen a lot of companies trying to figure this out. Workers, we got a survey from Gensler on workers where you've got over 80% wanting to be at the office at least some of the time. And pre-COVID, there already were about 10% of people working from home most of the time. So a shift there, but still a lot of interest in hybrid and being at the office. And one other key point I wanted to raise on office is, some of these quotes that have been in the media. A lot of people have seen the quote about, or the comment in the media about Twitter saying everyone can work from home indefinitely. Well, it turns out that's not what the CEO said. He said if our employees are in a role and situation that enables them to work from home and they want to continue to work from home, then they will make it happen. And I think that's one of the key things as we think about this. Some roles lend themselves to working at home and some don't. And that's what a lot of companies back to the KPMG are trying to figure out: which roles can go home if people want to, which roles are we going to force people home, and which roles still need a presence at the office. Next slide, please. And last office slide, this is from VTS, their office demand index. They do sort of a customer relationship management for office leasing people in the States. They're noticing office leasing activity back to within 9% of normal overall. And this, I believe, was as of April. And in Seattle, it was up above pre-COVID, although it was trending down pre-COVID. So what we're seeing is a lot of the US, a couple months ahead of Canada in terms of vaccinations, in terms of opening up, and office leasing activity is really strong, which is another good indicator for the future of office, that not everybody's going to be working from home. Next slide, please. So that was office. So whirlwind, a couple slides on multi-res. Yep, thank you. So this is, we took CMHC data, which is released in October of each year, and took a look at what it meant for downtown versus non-downtown rental buildings. And this is the purpose-built rental supply. It's not the condo supply, it is the purpose-built. And what I think is no surprise that the office space downtown is fairly empty, and there's been an increase in vacancy in the apartment inventory downtown. So if you look at the light blue bar across, you can just see that's the, downtown 2020, an increase everywhere, and it's gotten quite high in some cities. A lot of new supply in the downtown because this was a very popular place to live pre-COVID, and so some of that is opened, and yet we haven't had the migration of people from both domestic and international into our downtowns, which is normally who tends to fill up these buildings, are newcomers. That hasn't happened, so we've seen a rise in vacancy. We can go to the next slide. But one key point, if we skip over Toronto for 1 second, is to look at, this is absorption. So using kind of more the office definition of absorption, which is net change in occupied units. And you can see in every market, there's actually more occupied purpose-built rental units in October 2020 than there was in October 2019. So there's been growth there. Toronto, there hasn't been. Obviously, there's been some decline. I think some of that's been flight to quality into a lot of the condo supply, which came off the Airbnb market, came off of other sources, and that's sort of brought people out of that. Also, probably some people leaving the area, and again, no newcomers coming in. Next slide. And this speaks to the newcomers. At GWLRA, we track both the permanent immigrants as well as the non-permanent residents. The non-permanent residents include students as well as people who might be working at different jobs downtown on a temporary basis, so they're important to our rental supply. So we add them up. Toronto gets about 37% of these people, but this is for all of Canada. And you can see how much it dropped and then the rebound. A lot of immigrants come from that non-permanent resident basis, which is why we need to track them together, because otherwise you'd be double counting people. So if someone is currently here, finished their studies and gets offered a chance to be a Canadian citizen, they don't need a new apartment. They are the same person in the same apartment. And so that's why we have to track these together. So you can see by 2022, we think we'll be somewhere between where we were pre-COVID and post, and probably above COVID levels in terms of newcomers, which is really good news for the apartment sector, and also good news for the office sector, because a lot of the people that come to fill the jobs in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal are international. Okay, investment slides. Last two. You can just skip to the next one. Took some MSCI data. So they track the investments of the major institutions. So GWLRA, QuadReal, Oxford, Cadillac, Ivanhoe, many more, all in here. You can see that overall, this was in the 4 quarters ending Q1 2021. Overall, a negative 2.7% total return, with a positive income return and a negative capital return. But you can see, industrial, very strong. Rob explained, this has been a really good time period if you have industrial real estate, high in demand. And residential, a little bit more muted, but people are still using apartments. People still need a place to live. There's still a lot of confidence in that. And then we've seen the capital returns on office and retail being a little lower. On office, it's not so much the cap rates that have changed. It is more the confidence in the future office leasing. And we all know a lot of companies, we don't know who's coming back, who's not, how much space is going to be there. There's new vacancies, so the rental curve's changing. And last slide. Really quick, the one on the left is just looking at the spread between cap rates and bond rates. So the dotted line in the middle is what you're watching. You can see where it is now, and it's actually reasonably high. So that spread could come down, and that means there's probably some room for cap rate compression or flipping it around for prices to go up on assets. And then this JLL chart on dry powder, which means cash or capital available in the market looking for real estate. You can just see it keeps going up and up. And there's just so much demand to have real estate. It provides a steady return. It provides an inflation protection, or it has in the past. And so that is increasing its demand. So with that, that's a quick whirlwind of office, multi-res, and the investment market. I will, I think, turn it to Sheila.
That was positively amazing, Wendy. Of course, we've got a gazillion more questions. And so I think it's time for Q&A with the panel. So the format for this whole section is that I've got a bunch of questions, but through the Q&A, please feel free for those of you who have joined the session to ask whatever questions you want. This is your opportunity. And we'll go for about the next 25 minutes or so on whatever questions. And it's really intended to be informal and to have a bunch of dialogue, both with the audience and of course, those of us on the panel. So I'm going to start off the first one, and that is experience, right? Part of the whole role of real estate is to, yes, it's about bricks and mortar, but how do you captivate the experience for the people that are in our assets, whether it's retail, office, or industrial? And what can we do as an industry within each of your individual asset classes to highlight that experience? And Meredith, I know that you're probably well versed in this topic, so I'll start with you to talk about retail, because I think there's many lessons in retail that the rest of us can benefit in the other asset classes.
Absolutely. We think a lot about the experience. So At Brookfield, we really view our centers as hubs for their community that are really positioned to serve their community. So we try to balance and think about what's important to our local consumers and bring kind of that micro strategy down to our curation. So as I mentioned, we've had this curation strategy where we're balancing having those sort of traditional specialty brands that are national, everybody wants to shop them, but also in fact think about what are those sort of local services that we could also bring, or sort of local businesses that really make a difference. And a great example we have is in San Antonio, Texas. We have a center, the Shops at La Cantera. We had a national restaurant brand that sat out front and closed. This is even pre-pandemic, and was just not performing. And so with the opportunity, we actually worked with a family that was building their business outside of Mexico to bring this very authentic experience that was kind of true to the community, true to the cuisine. They bring in live music each night for dinner. And we got such a warm response from the community. So that was such a great example. We're really willing to bring, not just have an experience for the sake of experience, but how are you creating a place that really speaks to the community and what that consumer wants to happen within that area. So thinking a lot about in terms of our tenancy, as well as physical design and how we use common spaces to bring an experience that's authentic is where we find it's a very meaningful difference to our consumers.
So I'm just going to add to a piggyback question before going on to the other assets. So that means I would think in retail, instead of, in addition to the franchises and the retail chains, you want something new and different for that market. So how do you find that? And then how do you make sure you underwrite it properly in order to be feasible for the projects that you're into?
Absolutely. So we have a whole team that is business development. And so that team is located within their local markets. They're canvassing in person. This last year, it's been a little more difficult, but they have built a network of those small and regional businesses to really understand how do we think about the consumer experience and how do we really bring that local quality into the centers. In addition, we try to provide a lot of insights as to our consumers. And so we don't simply look at demographics when we're studying our markets, we're also looking at consumer behaviors. How do they want to engage? How do they buy today? What are their preferences for brand affinity or at a price point perspective? And we're trying to take this data to really apply to what is the right experience that we want to generate. And so when we find these experiences, we are looking at how we allocate TA. How do we shape these deals? They may be a little different. How do we think about credit worthiness? Knowing that in some cases, we're going to bring something that's going to be relevant to the community because we know that's going to build, as well as also bring benefit to the co-tenants that we have within the center, so that in essence, there's the mutual benefit and overall lift of the property that can be shared.
Cool, thank you. So Wendy, direct correlation to office. So maybe you could, and you could argue residential as well. Maybe you could share a little bit on the experience on both, on the people side on both of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly that's been a trend pre-COVID and in the 21st century. It's been experiential office and a better experience in multi-residential. So we've been building new multi-residential for a while and noticing that there really was a renter who wanted a superior experience, a great location, lots of walkable amenities, were willing to pay more than what you pay to rent maybe in a suburban or an older building to have amenities. Could be fitness center, rooftop decks. The one in my background is actually from our office building in downtown Vancouver that's just finishing construction. But that kind of concept has been really important. So the Live More at Bay and Gerard in Toronto be an example. So a really superior experience. And office, you could say, sort of is going the same direction, where there's this spectrum of tenants. Some will pay for experience and really want that experience. And maybe in terms of office tenants, they'll find a way to take slightly less space in order to have experiential space. And then there's always some older buildings which offer more of a value proposition. So there's a spectrum there that we have try to position ourselves on the experience side. Big experience is important both in multi-res and office, especially under COVID, but even pre-COVID. Health and safety, and health broadly defined: fitness center, the bike lockers, the bike rooms to be able to ride your bike to work if you want to. Healthier food options, be another one, and I'm sure Meredith has a lot of experience with that one. The air quality is another one in office buildings. People, now we didn't used to have brokers and tenants showing up knowing all about MERV 13 filters and the ASHRAE 62.1 standard, but now we do. Vancouver Center 2 uses a completely different technology, which is hydronic heating and cooling. So it doesn't circulate contaminated air potentially. It's all radiant heating and cooling and 100% fresh air. So, tenants are interested in that and brokers are interested in that. And I think maybe that's one slight change in the experience from COVID is paying a little more attention to the air. It was there in the LEED standard, but I think it's there a little bit more post-COVID. And I guess maybe one more thing I'll add is just, and I think this is coming out of what's changed in our world during COVID, is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that our spaces feel inclusive to everybody who works there, and being more aware when some people don't feel inclusive. And we've done some polling, and it's some research is coming out shortly, and I can talk about it more later. But the work from home experience hasn't been felt the same by everybody. I think Rob brought up that some people were still working in places where they were more exposed to COVID. Office workers, some people did not have very good spaces at home. And we also want to make sure that everyone, and what people who did, we still want to make sure people feel welcome at the office, no matter whether they're an immigrant, they are a visible minority, they're a woman, LGBTQ+, any of those. We want to make sure everyone feels welcome. And that's part of the experience. I think what's going to change a little bit in the experiences going forward at office spaces.
Terrific, thank you. So Rob, on the industrial supply chain warehouse, DC, your experience is a different animal altogether, right? You've got to worry about your tenant experience, but then there are employees as well. And I have to think in the war for talent, especially in your sector, that's a massive consideration as you contemplate your assets.
Yeah, clearly, this is something, this sustainability from a development perspective, building core, air handling is something, these things just weren't discussed really in any great detail in the industrial world. Like, we're decades behind the office world. And, these investments are just starting to take place now. LEED standards fit well for office fit up. And COVID really shone a light on that. As I mentioned, we've all heard about the Amazon facility in Brampton being shut down, numerous occasions, and different facilities being shut down because of poor air quality and the number of people in the warehouses. So, it's really up to the tenants to manage their internal experience, but we can create from a management perspective, everything outside the box. And as we build the box, we can certainly build these into the base building. And again, most of that's being driven historically through municipalities and building codes. But, if you go over to Europe, we're way behind Europe. Fresh air and natural light in warehouses, surprise, like not just little windows in the, above the shipping doors, but, skylights that, shine natural daylight across the entire interior floor.
So actually, when you heard Meredith speak about, going to Mexico and finding a really cool tenant to put into her mix, why wouldn't we contemplate the same thing in office and industrial for the, the employees and those experience, and create mini centers? And I know we've been involved in planning some of these industrial facilities, so it really kind of mixes up all of our asset classes, doesn't it? It says, how do we take a little bit of this and put it together there?
Well, clearly a trend that, again, the big greenfield spaces in the big urban markets are almost gone now. There's no 200-300 acre sites that are unencumbered by overland flow. Like, a lot of the sustainability from an industrial perspective is about, respecting the environment, stormwater management systems that are, basically ducks unlimited, and great habitats, natural habitats, and creating environments for the local residents and employees to enjoy some outdoor space, not just this, swamp stormwater management pond outside of the entrance way to a warehouse. So, but, in the interior, sort of the urban areas where we're focused a lot of our attention on the acquisition and development for the last mile, and for, the lack of sort of new product close into the cities. We're seeing in other jurisdictions, in London and other places in the UK, where, you get that multi-use. When multi-use has been around for office and retail for some time, now we're going to start to see that sort of that use of warehouse use being included in that, for last mile distribution, for some high-tech manufacturing, perhaps some of this assembly for food packaging and food kits that I mentioned earlier, that I think really are going to continue on, cold storage facilities. So, catering, I think it's a great opportunity as more people sort of pivot to that economy.
Let's explore that further. I'm going offline altogether just because I'm curious about what you've said. But if you think about it, industrial, we need it everywhere. If we're getting, Amazon deliveries every day, being able to put industrial into the base of office buildings or into the back of retail stores or whatever, what does that look like in the future? Imagine, 5 or 10 years from now, how does that play out in our market? Because it's changing how we live, work, shop, and play. So how does industrial fit into that? I'll start with Rob and then maybe pivot to Meredith on that one.
Yeah, I think it's been discussed a few times, Meredith, and retail as they reimagine, as they create the experiences, and Peloton and others. I mean, you're going to have that experience. Warehouse will just perhaps be a part of it, close in, decentralized warehouses. I mean, we've gone to these massive and these distribution facilities outside of major urban areas, and 2 or 3 across the country to service, but it's got to get in closer to the population. So I think there would just be a natural, assuming, most people still are this not in my backyard. I mean, if, the Amazons of the world or anybody who are, trying to develop for last mile, the local residents are pretty much pushed back very hard that, delivery vans and the congestion that it's going to cause it is a hurdle that municipalities are facing now. Developers, and when we're developing and redeveloping a site that is no longer manufacturing because the jobs are gone into, industrial, because they still want the employment. Not all employment land is being converted to residential. Cities are, drawing a line and saying, okay, we need jobs too. So there's a balance that's going to evolve over time. Some municipalities are certainly more open to it. Some ratepayers or different municipalities in GTA are certainly much more vocal. And there's processes in place. It just further delays the development cycle. And most, well-established developers, are very in tune with the, condo developers have been like this for a while, but, industrial is just getting there. But just being in tune with the residents and going to the hearings and, really getting out in front of it as we sort of launch these new facilities close into residential. But so it's, again, I'm not sure I've answered your question, but it's naturally going to evolve. It's going to take some time. And I think one of the main obstacles will be the municipality and bylaws and local residents not really wanting this in their backyard. They want the packages, but they don't want the source of the cause of the congestion coming in their backyard.
So Meredith, last mile as it relates to, the shopping mall, what an opportunity. Maybe you could talk that through, and I would love to hear it from the consumer's perspective. I go buy a suitcase. What does that look like? And how do you deal with it right from there through last mile and distribution?
Absolutely. So we really see consumers are thinking about, you get up in the morning, it's trip mission based. I may want to go and look at suitcases and find like exactly what I want in the right color, but I'm not sure what the offering is. So I want to go in a store and look at it, maybe walk out with it. Maybe it's not in stock. It's just in the showroom. In some cases, I may look online and say, I want this To-Me bag. I know exactly what it is, this carry-on, and I'd like to get it today. So I may pick it up, or I may see if it's like could be shipped to me within 2 days. So for retailers and for owners like us with our properties, we really have to think about how do we serve the holistic consumer experience, and so that we're positioned and ready to meet the needs of that trip mission as the consumer needs it. What that really does to the consumer is it makes a Brookfield Center the venue of choice for all my retail needs, whether it be discovery or I can pick it up quickly. We want that Brookfield Center to be the center of choice. So we kind of look at it to see opportunity about how do we use space likely for a micro fulfillment opportunity? Because I think to Rob's point, you have municipalities, and quite frankly, in some of our centers, you don't want to convert half the property to a warehouse. It fundamentally changes that retail experience. Especially imagine trying to come in one of our parking lots and we have trucks coming through and blocking your path. It would get very confusing. But there is underutilized space across malls. Malls are large and you have backspace, or you may have the low quality sites kind of in a corner within the property. Can those be converted for some of that micro fulfillment where it's almost kind of unseen to the consumer, but it's a ready-made service for the retailer that they know they can have those goods there. They can be sort of stored for quick fulfillment and like same day shipping. Or maybe we've all started to pop up curbside pickups. That was something at Brookfield we quickly did in April to start servicing our retailers, and we're seeing customer adoption grow. So are we going to also facilitate that service for our retail brands. And I think as a real estate owner, how we utilize that space, not just for last mile shipping, but also the pickup opportunity. And so the customer has options, and it keeps your specialty retailers competitive, because the Targets and the Walmarts and the Amazons have built very vast networks through their stores and their DCs that allow them to serve the consumers. We want our specialty brands to be just as competitive and in the consideration set for consumers. And really the malls are the best place to enable that, because we can take, scale across the property and scale for brands who can't make that investment themselves. It just doesn't make sense in terms of the amount of capital they would have to put in to build their own individual networks. So we kind of see this opportunity to really just bring everyone together and create that holistic solution.
So Wendy, of course, we talk about supply chain warehouse. It then makes its way to the store, and we have micro fulfillment. Now what happens when it gets to the new condo or purpose-built rental tower? Where does the box go? And they don't have lobbies big enough for all those boxes. What do you do with it then?
Well, yeah, so we have the issue of the legacy assets, which, we'll not call them old, we'll call them legacy assets that were built pre-e-commerce. And then obviously our newer buildings where we're taking this into account, obviously, because this is here to stay. We've got a package locker company that does that in some of our buildings. So all the delivery people, they come into the building, they go straight to the locker bank, and they punch in some codes, they leave the package. The person whose package it is gets a text, they're upstairs, they come down, and it works. The useful thing during the pandemic is everybody's always home. Most people on rental are home. So they come down right away and they get their package. We're a little bit worried about, with this increased use of e-commerce, what happens in December and November when people are at the office or they're at work or at university and their packages show up. Do we have enough locker space for all of this? And so that is still a challenge that we're trying to resolve, as to how long can things stay in the lockers, and how much locker space. There's also the aesthetics of it. So we're looking at, well, how can you blend it in? Can there be a mural on it so it becomes part of the lobby ambiance and the experience as the lockers are built in? Or do you put them down one level on P1 and have some, in the future, perhaps there's some sort of an ingress egress for the delivery, and they're not, all the packages don't have to show up in the lobby. So there's a lot of challenges at the apartment level that have not yet been solved. The package lockers, though, help a lot in terms of the load on our staff, who would otherwise have to sign for it and then find the tenant, the resident, and let them know. So the lockers are a huge help to us. In the older buildings, the problem is, where do you store these if we don't have the lockers? Where do you store the packages while you're waiting for people? Again, right now everybody's home, tends to be home, so that's easy. You can just text them and they come down. But again, what will happen once we return to normal life? And looking for storage space for packages is a big challenge across North America in rental apartments.
If I just jump in with a little, what I see was happening pre-COVID was most of the packages got delivered to the office receptionist. Office buildings and security. Obviously there's a little hook for office to get people back in the office. You can have your packages delivered here, not on your front step. So, and that goes for new res, having lockers and methodologies for packages, larger packages to be delivered to a home when someone's not home is a big concern for sure. The porch pirates.
Yeah, and we are looking for our office tenants. We are actually looking at, again, now that we've piloted some different, package lockers, do we put those in our office buildings? Because
right.
Because some companies don't let people have their Amazon packages delivered to the receptionist because she or he has other things to do besides sign for your package. Right? They have other responsibilities. So there is that issue. So if we can, help all of our tenants by having some sort of an automated package service in an office building, that is definitely something being looked at. And I don't know whether if your office colleagues are at Quadrille or Brookfield have got a solution on that, but I know that a lot of landlords are talking about how we can help in that way.
So if you think about it, we're talking about experience. You just made a comment about we need more people to deal with packages. And Meredith would say you need more people to come up with the animated experience in a shopping mall. And Rob, you probably are going to say you need more people to deal with HVAC and cleaning. Like, there's just, jobs aren't going away. They're just changing. And so we have new jobs and new opportunities. So what does, again, I'm going off script again, guys. What does a career look like for people coming up behind us in the real estate world? If you're saying in a post-COVID world, here's how you might contemplate something different in your career with respect to my asset class, what does that look like?
Huh.
That's
Who
it.
wants to go first?
That is
Yeah.
a great question,
It's a
Sheila.
great
I have
question.
so many thoughts on this.
Okay, so Meredith, you go first.
Honestly, I think about really in our sector, and I think across commercial real estate in general, the application of data. When you think about now with technology, how much big data is out there in terms of our consumers, and that applies to all of us, right? Even in office and multifamily, you can now really study movement by using Wi-Fi analytics. Mobile location data can tell you how someone is moving throughout their day, and you can start to really build this greater understanding. And I think we're sort of in this moment where there's so much to unlock in real time about the clients that we serve, be it consumer clients, be it our tenants, and how we put that together. And so I encourage anybody as I talk to them, like, data and analytics are so important, and it's very hard to find people who have experience in real estate and the application of that analytics and how to bring those insights together in a meaningful way. So this is something I am very passionate about, because we are looking for these people every day to try to bring some new insights into how we're thinking about the business.
Yeah,
That's
actually,
a
Meredith.
tough one to find. Sorry, Wendy, go over to you. I'm sure you've got the same challenges.
Yeah, well, certainly I think the data and the analytics, but then there's also the ability to analyze it for the human experience. Like, we're all trying to provide a superior experience at our properties. And so the person that can then take the data and has the knowledge, whether maybe they have an anthropology degree, which, you don't normally look for people for real estate careers in anthropology, sociology, political science, like there's so many fields. I have a degree in history, so it sort of brings all those together. But I think that is something that we, in terms of what you're looking for, is you need to have that knowledge of how people think, and how do you interpret that data of people moving around. It's not like, geez, it would be so much better if everybody would equally use all the spaces, but of course that doesn't happen. There's certain preferred spaces, and to understand why, and how do we make more spaces preferred. So I think it's that human experience, people that want to work with people and data, and being able to bring the two together. And it's two different skill sets. So, but it's
context. It's how do you bring context to what you're looking at? Absolutely.
So I think we need to be recruiting elsewhere.
In psychology, so nothing to do with real estate.
Exactly, but there's lots of people with degrees in psychology that actually, that are, particularly on the retail side, you do run into a lot of people, and I think that's what you need, is to understand how humans think and how humans behave, and so we can provide a better experience. So I think from the real estate industry, really important that we embrace lots of different backgrounds. It's not just we don't want everyone just to have a real estate degree to come into our field, because we need these other ideas. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, I was just going to, I get asked the question, will the robots, we see Boston Robotics, will the robots replace the warehouse worker? Eventually, probably, yeah. But, the computer didn't replace the accountant. All technology is as a tool, and as the generations sort of, today's current warehouse worker will continue to doing what they're doing, and it will slowly be sort of technologied and retire. And the next generation, without a doubt, when I date myself, when I graduated, and my first job was IBM engineering, and it was technology was everything. And people that could predict what the technology was going to look like, and IBM was obviously in the forefront. It's still the same thing, technology. So if you're getting into real estate, I don't care if it's industrial or retail or residential, you can understand technology and the trends. We've talked about it, right? And then how to use that data and weave it together. Industrial was always just this asset class that, just box and literally a shed, right? Nobody really cared. But we think about real estate, people and technology will always be the most important things for future proofing of the company.
Okay. I've got one last question, then we'll close it out. And the question, so in workplace and office, where I've spent a lot of my career, literally the last year has been the largest change management activity globally. People have learned that they can work anywhere, anytime, any place. They can work from home or they can work from the office, and they all have choice. And so there's been lots of innovations around that. In your asset class, what innovation has taken place during COVID that you see continuing on the emergence, as we go back to new normal, ideally in 2022, as soon as possible? What does that innovation look like? Any takers on that one? And closing remarks at the same time.
I guess, again, it's just COVID was, again, a number of people have mentioned it. COVID was, it just sort of changed a little bit think escalated and sort of, it really lit the fire under certain asset classes and really shone the light on some weaknesses in global supply chain. For me, I mentioned technology already, but I guess one of the trends that will become is the multi-story warehouse. This is not new. It's new to North America, relatively new, certainly. That as they sort of weave the technologies into and sustainability. Again, this is just really lit the fire. So industrial was a benefit, big winner from COVID, but it also shone some lights on weaknesses from employees' health and safety and a number of other areas. So those trends are going to, I hope, continue on, and just sort of that. So the sustainability and maybe perhaps industrial will catch up to the office world in the next decade.
Oh, thank you, Wendy.
Well, I guess it's sort of some things happened while we were dealing with COVID, and I think much more attention on DEI, and I think that is here to stay. Making sure our buildings are inclusive, which I think I mentioned before, also on our carbon footprints and GHG emissions. And that's, while both of these things existed pre-COVID, that's not like there wasn't discrimination pre-COVID, and there was obviously greenhouse gas emissions at our buildings. So the greater attention though on reducing carbon footprints on some of the major office users, such as Amazon, Microsoft, the big banks, saying that they want to get to net zero carbon in the next number of years. Everyone's got their own time frame. The city of Vancouver wanting to go to zero or to greatly reduce embodied carbon in new construction and development. So I think there's those are a couple of trends that sort of took place while we were a little bit distracted by COVID. We also got focused on those two, and I think those are going to stay, particularly for new office developments, but also for apartments. And I think for apartments, the trend is more people will probably work from home occasionally, so we do need to have more spaces in the building because they won't want to stay in their one-bedroom apartment all day long. We know that we've had to do that, and it's not fun. So we're looking at more Wi-Fi enabled spaces, common spaces, great experiences in our apartments as well.
Perfect. And Meredith, you've got the whole runway in front of you for shopping. What does this look like coming out of COVID?
Absolutely. I'm going to build on Rob's comments on technology. I think we were able to use technology to really start to enhance the shopping experience kind of out of necessity. So leveraging technology, for example, an app that is called Stakeholder from a company, Waitwhile, that allowed you to actually schedule the time that you wanted to be in the store. So while we were under restrictions, that became very important during holiday for our retailers, because it allowed them to give the best service to the consumer because they knew the allotted time that individual was coming in. Also leveraging such technologies as FitMatch, which is a company that was in some of our properties that basically took a virtual sketch of your body. So you could start to try on clothes without having to go into the dressing room and physically do it. So we needed that during COVID to make our consumers feel safe, but it also adds a real elevated experience. And so I see this blending of technology for the right uses, if it's enhancing the experience and delivering something that's so spectacular to the consumer that they want to get off their couch and come into the center and have this sort of great shopping experience across our tenants. I think building on the technology in our properties to deliver that will only continue to grow. And the last year has really just accelerated our kind of research and piloting of such technology to see what we can develop.
That's great. Well, listen, thank you very much. I really loved the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Josie for closing remarks. And thank you again. It's been great.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, everyone, especially to our panelists, Wendy, Meredith, Rob, and especially to Sheila as our moderator for a really great, interesting discussion, and fantastic insights for all of us here. Several other thanks as well to Sharon Cardy for managing our Zoom webinar interface. And also to our programs committee, especially to Janice Duncan and Ali Mayer Hunter for helping to assemble this rock star panel and fantastic event for all of us. I have the pleasure as the co-chair of the programs committee of Toronto Crew to thank to everybody, and also to our sponsors, without whom events like this could not happen, and especially to all of you attendees, including the ones from outside of Toronto Crew across Canada. Thank you all for attending. I hope you had some great nuggets and some great takeaways from our conversation today. Just a quick reminder that a recording of the webinar will be available shortly after the session ends. And we would also ask that there will be a short 3-question survey that goes out with the recording of the webinar, and would appreciate feedback from you, the audience members, to help us improve our program offerings. And so with that, we are at time. I see we are at 3:45 Eastern time. I would like to just say a final thank you to all of you for attending our session, and hope to see you at a future Toronto Crew event, possibly at our golf event in September. Thank you all.